Hi everyone, today I'm going to give you 10 hidden gem Filmic Pro tips for you to learn. Now if you're a beginner, filming is the best, filming is the best, I love filming. Why is my shot so bumpy? So much for stabilization, Filmic Pro, thanks a lot. This is going to be really helpful if you're someone who's a professional filmmaker with a phone or just simply very experienced.
Oh yeah, absolutely perfect.
These could serve as really timely reminders. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Tip number 1 is to use stitch recorded footage. So this is essentially when you pause your recording and then you can carry on recording it straight from unpausing it. So for example, if we go to settings on the bottom right here where the cog is, tap that. That brings us straight to the menu here. If we go to device towards the top right, press on that. As we go down the list, you see stitch recorded footage. So we're going to press that and turn it on the little toggle there. So you come out of this, and now when we hit record and we're recording as normal, but instead of when we stop it by pressing it again, we're actually going to pause it. So when we press this record button, you can see now it's got the pause symbol. This is really important to know because it's now stopped your footage, but it's actually paused it. So when you record again, it will just carry on as one long take. So if we do another recording here, for example, we're going to hit that record, stop that, and it pauses. Come down to the flowers here, same again. The way to actually stop this whole take is to hold onto that pause button. So rather than just pressing it once like you do in a normal recording, you're actually going to hold that button and it turns white and we're back to the main menu. To look at that, we now press play button, putting all your shots into one take. This is really helpful for B-roll and vlogging, so you can get all your shots, and rather than having to edit loads of shots together, you've got it all in one. Tip number 2 is understanding these 3 left-hand side white dots in between your ISO number and your shutter speed number. Now at the moment, the ISO is number 22, which is the lowest ISO you can get on my phone, iPhone 8, which is exactly what you want. You always want to get your ISO as low as you possibly can to get the cleanest, least amount of noise in your image. Now these white dots actually represent a step up in numbers of ISO levels. So the left one here is the lowest ISO level. Rather than going through the dial and going one by one, you can just do moderate level or high level. Now the issue with high level, obviously even moderate, if I click off the screen dials here, you can see on the right hand side how noisy that image has gotten. It's really horrific and rough to look at because the ISO is so high. It's basically brightening up your image, but it's also exposing the areas which really have too much noise. So if we press this to bring up the dials, as I say, that white one now on the far right of the 3 dots is your highest level ISO, moderate ISO, low ISO, and you can see those change at the top of the screen here as you go up and down the ISOs. So I'd ignore the 2 white dots on the right if I'm honest, and just use that left-hand side dot. My third hidden gem tip for Filmic Pro is to turn your audio gain completely off. So if you go to the cog on the bottom right here to bring up the menu, we go to audio, and we'll see as we scroll down, you've got the option for automatic gain correction. Now, if you turn that on, that'll basically give you a much heightened sound. So it's like when you're using the ISO on your image where it brightens up the image, you get more noise. So using automatic gain correction, your voice might come out a bit louder, but actually you're bringing up all the noise of what's around you as well. And you can get some static noise and really rough kind of static noise in the background, almost like white noise that you get. So I would avoid using automatic gain correction. You'll probably get clearer sound if you just turn it off. The 4th hidden gem tip that I want to show you guys is, if in doubt, focus peak. Now what does that do? Basically, this is something that's really good for checking your focus and how clear your focus is, particularly for shallow depths of field. I find it's a little bit flaky when it comes to deeper depths of field, but if you go to the bottom left of your screen here, you'll see a capital A. We're going to tap that, and then if you look at the top of the screen, we now have our live analytics. You've got the 3 analytics on the left-hand side of those 4, which basically show your underexposed and overexposed areas, and as well as what's correctly exposed. But the FP is your focus peaking. So if I bring this back to where we were, and I'm going to tap on FP, now we have all these green marks and these green lines all over the screen. These green lines generally represent what's in focus. So if we bring this focus wheel down, you'll see, especially in the path as well, we'll get a lot more green dots. If we push it away, we can see the focus is failing away from us and going into the deep depth. but if we bring it closer, we get a nice shallow depth of field. And what I'm trying to get is this barbecue here perfectly exposed and focused. Now, obviously you can just use your eye, that's fine, but sometimes in situations it's a little bit tricky, particularly on a small screen phone like this. So you may want to use this technique. So see on this barbecue, whereabouts we can get the most green on this barbecue. For me, that looks really good, so I'm going to press out of focus peaking. And that barbecue is really sharp, nice crisp, and completely in focus. The background is out of focus, which is what we want. We want a nice shallow depth of field on this barbecue or whatever your subject is. So if in doubt and you can't quite see on a phone, maybe it's a really sunny day and on your phone screen you're getting lots of reflections, well, actually, you can use this focus peaking for shallow depths of fields particularly to make sure you get a nice, clean, clear focus. My next tip is if you're getting quite shaky footage when you're walking around and you want nice smooth footage, then use your stabilization that's on Filmic Pro's menu. So again, go to the bottom right, the cog, tap that, and on the bottom left, you'll see stabilization. So if you're getting lots of shaky footage, particularly if you're just starting out with Filmic Pro and wondering why your footage isn't coming out nice and smooth, hit that stabilization, that will turn black. You'll see now that we get a much smoother image, even though I'm about to walk on gravel. Of course, make sure that you're walking smoothly as possible. That way you'll get a really nice shot. But you'll see the difference between this and the initial shot that we got is night and day. The next tip is to do with stabilization, and that is not to swing your phone all over the place with stabilization. The reason being, if you do that, the sensor has to kind of readjust at the last minute. So if you do a whip pan, for example, you're going to end up with a jolt at the end of your whip. So make sure you're using nice smooth steps during the heel to toe movement, rather than jolting it around everywhere and thinking that's still going to be stable, because it won't. You'll still get that jolty kind of motion at the end. My next tip is to just know when you're using 4K footage, it's really going to eat up your battery and your storage on your phone. If you use extreme bitrate as well, Filmic Extreme, which gives you the most information in your image, it's great. 4K mixed with that for post-editing, if you're doing dynamic zooms, that kind of stuff, you want to pan across one shot that you've made, it works really, really well, and you won't lose quality of your image by shooting 4K. But if you're just doing a vlog or a simple hobby video, something like that, 1080 HD really is more than enough for what you need. As long as your shots are lined up nicely and how you want it, and you're happy with it by the time you hit record, 1080 HD is more than enough for what you'll need, unless you want to do lots of post-editing, in which case you should use 4K. Next tip is a really, really important tip. Whether using Filmic Pro or any other filmmaking app, or just your phone itself in the native app, do not zoom in on anything with your phone. It will ruin the image and give you a really noisy image, in the same way that if you lift your ISO number too high, it'll give you exact same kind of grainy, horrible looking footage. So I want you to do me a favor right now. Go to your settings cog on the bottom right, go to device, scroll down, and where it says hide zoom rocker, tap that button to say yes, hide zoom rocker, come out, and you won't ever see that zoom rocker ever again. You can zoom in on the right hand side here if you switch from focus to zoom, but again, the noise on this image is horrific, so you don't want to do that. Just avoid zoom altogether. You can instead, whilst it's not the same as doing a zoom, you can do a push-in, which is where you change the focus as you go from point A to point B, closer to your subject. I've got a video on how to do that. If you want to learn how to do that, check out my Filmic Pro playlist at the end of this video. Also, you use a automatic focus pull whilst you're doing that as well, and I've got a video on that too. So don't ever zoom. If you do, smack yourself on the back of the head. The next tip is quite a complicated one. It involves live analytics, frames per second, and the resolution that you're using. So if we go to settings here, right now the resolution is at HD 1080p. If we go to frames per second, keep an eye on the A, which represents live analytics options on the left-hand side here as well. At 24 frames per second in 1080 HD, the ability to use live analytics is still there and active. If I go to 25, it's still there, 30 is still there, 48 is still there, 50, and even slow motion at 60 frames per second. However, when we want to go up to a slower slow motion, a higher frame rate if you like, 120 or 240, that live analytics disappears, whether you're using 120 or 240. If you go back down to 60 frames per second in 1080 HD, we still have the live analytics. If we go to 4K resolution at 24 frames per second, change that to 4K, and go back into frame rates, again, we've got live analytics all the way up to 30 frames per second. Then when we go to 48, that disappears completely. So if you're in 4K and you want to use live analytics for, say, anything above 30 frames per second, then you really need to check your live analytics at 30 frames per second or lower, and then change your frames per second. Same with your 1080 HD as well. You'll want to check your live analytics before you get into the settings that will take away live analytics. Now I'm going to show you how to get rid of the light flickering on your screen of your smartphone when you're filming narrative films, music films, documentaries, whatever it is, vlogs, the works. So essentially this is all to do with light frequencies and energies in your country that it uses essentially. So if you look at this map here, you can see that the blue is mainly all Europe and the red is mainly all the States and Canada. So if you're in Europe, basically, you have 50 Hertz energy supplies frequencies. That means that the light's rippling is going to be clashing with your 1/48 shutter speed and 24 frames per second. However, if you're in the States, 1/48 shutter speed with 24 frames per second, matching that 180 shutter speed rule is perfect. But if you're in the UK, you can see when you change that to 25 frames per second capture and playback, that actually eliminates all flickering of the light, and it fixes that flickering issue for you. Now, this is an issue everywhere you go in the UK and Europe, but certain places, certain types of lights will cause this flickering. So again, 25 is fine, 24 frames per second capture and playback in Europe and various countries, if you look back at that map where it's blue, will give you a rippling effect on your screen in certain lighting situations. If you want to learn how to do the more advanced things in Filmic Pro, like an automatic focus pull or a push-in using the automatic focus pull, then check out my Filmic Pro playlist that's on screen right now. It will really help you out, and I have tutorials for just about everything on Filmic Pro. So I'll see you on the next one, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.